Everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber's 2021 Government Forecast. I'm Joe Bauman, I'm the president of the Chamber, and on behalf of our staff and our volunteer ambassadors and our board of directors, welcome to this morning's very important discussion that we're all looking forward to. Before we get started, I just have a couple of brief introductions. First, I do want to introduce the rest of the team. So Kelly Bennett is our events and marketing manager. And Kelly's the one who put this all together this morning, so thank you so much. And then we have a brand new staff member who's in her second week. Rachel, is that right? So Rachel DeVries is our membership engagement manager. So please welcome Rachel to the team. And Cheryl Geralds, who is our operations manager, apparently is having some technical difficulties this morning. So I don't think she's on the call yet this morning. So, that is Team 130. I also want to acknowledge our board of directors. I noticed we have several members of the board on the call this morning. So if you can just give a wave to be acknowledged, we'd appreciate it. And finally, we also have several of our ambassadors with us this morning, our chamber foot soldiers, as I like to call them, who I know probably more than any other group are really looking forward to the return of in-person events. So they can help support those events. So if you are an ambassador, if you could just give a wave and be acknowledged, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. I also want to thank and acknowledge our sponsors for this morning. Our sponsors, obviously, in the world of COVID, have become more critical than ever for the chamber to be able to continue to provide the level of services we are for our members. You know, it's been a tough year losing all of our major fundraising events. So the support we get from our sponsors is really critically important to allow us to continue to operate in a near as normal way as possible. So our diamond sponsor for this morning's program is the Clark Hill Law Firm. Our platinum sponsor is the Bank of Ann Arbor. Our gold sponsors are Fenner, Melstrom, and Dooling CPAs and Mercantile Bank. And our silver sponsors are the Birmingham Shopping District and Comcast Business. So for you that are representing those organizations, please give a wave and be acknowledged as well. We really appreciate your support. And then lastly, I want to mention our legacy sponsors, and these are member businesses that make a significant contribution of support to the chamber on an annual basis to really provide underlying support and financing for all of the events that we do. And again, you know, this past year, they've been more important than ever in helping us continue to proceed. So our legacy sponsors for 2021 are Bank of Ann Arbor, Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union, Chief Financial Credit Union, Clark Hill PLC, North American Midway Entertainment, SAIC, and Beaumont Health. And so for those organizations, thank you so much. And if you're on the call, please wave and be acknowledged. All right, before I introduce our moderator, I do want to just provide some brief ground rules for this morning's presentations. We're going to ask everybody stay on mute to reduce background noise. Following the presentations by Senator Stabenow, Representative Stevens, and Representative Manoogian, we will allow opportunities to ask questions, but we're going to be using the chat feature in Zoom. So if you do have a question for either of the three, please just type it into the chat space, and our moderator will pick up that and ask the appropriate person the question. So with that, I do want to introduce Chris Treblecock. Was that right, Chris?
It's pretty close, Treblecock, but a lot of people go with Treblecock, so I don't correct them usually.
Chris Treblecock, who is one of the all-star attorneys from Clark Hill that we talked about a moment ago. As a leading labor, employment, and political lawyer with a community conscience, Chris is part of Clark Hill's nationwide employment and labor practice group. On behalf of Fortune 500 companies, medium and small employers, including government agencies, Chris litigates labor and employment disputes in federal and state courts and administrative agencies across the country. Chris offers creative, effective, and efficient solutions to clients facing the toughest wage and hour and civil rights litigation, including class action suits. With over 17 years of legal experience, clients turn to Chris for timely and practical solutions to the toughest employee relation problems which often avoids litigation. So Chris, please take it away.
Thanks, Joe, and thank you for the Birmingham Chamber for putting this event together. I mentioned briefly, being partly a proud father of a almost 12-year-old daughter, and I can't think of a greater thing that we have in the state of Michigan, which is such strong, vibrant role models for a young woman to look up to. And we're joined by three of those top folks here in Michigan in our representatives. And we're really lucky here in Michigan to have that type of leadership and role models for our young women. So thank you. U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow has always been a true friend to Oakland County communities. I know that firsthand. Since being elected to the U.S. Senate in 2000, she has been recognized for her ability to build coalitions and to get things done for Michigan and our country. Senator Stabenow is a national leader of the effort to make sure all people have affordable, quality health care, including mental health and affordable prescription drugs. That is something that Senator Stabenow has been fighting for throughout her entire career when she worked in the state legislature and in the House of Representatives before being elected senator. She's a champion for American manufacturing, and she's worked tirelessly during the pandemic to support our communities and secure funding for our small businesses. Senator Stabenow's office, I know from a personal experience, was instrumental in helping several of our clients during this pandemic with immigration issues, getting folks across in travel restrictions that were necessary so we didn't stop the supply chain and the manufacturing chain. As a co-chair of U.S. Senate's bipartisan Great Lakes Task Force, Senator Stabenow is focused on protecting the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, a program she authored that is helping to restore the Great Lakes and other waterways across Michigan. I think it's also worthy to note that Senator Stabenow was a co-sponsor or the sponsor in the Senate working with Congressman Stupak to ban offshore drilling on the Great Lakes, something that has become even more important as there's been battles on environmental issues. Please welcome our U.S. Senator, Debbie Stabenow.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Chris. Thanks so much. Good to see you. And please let your family know I said hello as well. And also, Joe, it's great to be with you and the whole chamber team this morning. I've really been looking forward to having a chance to connect, even though we all agree we would much rather be in person. So, and to my partner in the house, Haley Stevens, who is such a champion on manufacturing, and we work together all the time for Michigan, and State Rep Mari Manoogian. So it's great to be with all of you, and hopefully next time we'll be able to be in person. Obviously, I don't need to say this, but this has been a really, really tough year. In fact, it's more than a year now that we've really seen our way of life turned on its head. And for so many people, their family economy, their business economy. And so I want to first start out before walking through some of the things that we've been doing federally, just to thank the chamber and thank all of you for everything that you've been doing to support businesses and the community. And I do want to brag on all of you a bit, because even as things have been tough, you have and continue to have a great story to tell. And when you look at things like the brand new Daxton Hotel downtown Birmingham, which looks amazing, and the Birmingham Bloomfield Art Center has a new addition, and a number of renovations to better serve the community, which is terrific. And when I look at what the library looks like, the expanded Baldwin Public Library residents not only get books, but 3D printers and embroidery machines and even a laser engraver. And so incredible things that are happening, services to the community. And I have to say, personally, my son and his family live in Oakland County, and we can't wait till the weather is consistently better so we can go out to your beautiful parks and lakes and really enjoy beautiful Oakland County. So, and I also want to thank you again for supporting businesses and helping to keep customers safe as well. I know you've been helping to connect the community, keep folks healthy through the Health Check 2021 series, which has been very important. And the good news is, in the midst of a very, very, very challenging time, is that we are making progress on vaccinations. About 75% of Oakland County seniors are partially or fully vaccinated, and we've got to get everybody vaccinated to be able to get our lives back. That is incredibly important. So I just want to thank you again for being strong advocates. And let me just share a bit about what we have been focused on. I know you know highlights of this, but there's been a lot happening specifically related to the pandemic. And both Congresswoman Stevens and I are working very hard to support Michigan families to be able to get through all of this, support businesses, communities, to get through all of this and come out stronger from the pandemic. And it's going to take all of us really working together and continuing to work together. So when all this started a year ago, March, and when we started working on various COVID funding packages, of course, starting with healthcare and the vaccines and so on, and then moving on to supporting businesses with the PPP and being able to look at other ways to help families survive. But that latest and really the largest version of that hopefully takes us through now, through the initial, the major pieces of this front end on the crisis, is the American Rescue Plan. And that was signed into law last month, as you know, and it really is focused on three things, which is helping families and businesses survive the pandemic, getting people vaccinated and getting them the healthcare they need, and getting our schools safely reopened. So right now, when you look at it, we've got about half our households, 4.6 million Michiganders are receiving the $1,400 stimulus checks, which may be used to pay the bills and keep a roof over folks' head, or certainly in local businesses and supporting the local economy. So we're seeing that happen. Our schools in Michigan are receiving close to $5 billion to get students safely back to class, and frankly, their parents able to go back to work if their jobs are open, their workplaces are open. And this also includes what we now know as this glaring piece. We've all talked about broadband, high-speed internet, but boy, did it become apparent, the disparities around Michigan and around the country. So funding is in this package for more tablets or laptops or internet access for children who still need to be learning remotely, which are many places around Michigan. And obviously this has also been critical for healthcare, telehealth, as well as businesses, and really so almost every part of our lives, right? The other thing that the package did was provide Michigan about $10.3 billion for state and local governments to keep essential public services operating, which are really important. I'm sure you know about the business provisions that have been continued and added with a more robust piece, the targeted economic injury disaster loan programs, which are essentially small grants for small businesses. The Paycheck Protection Program is extended and expanded, and also expanded for nonprofits. The Local Restaurants Fund, I've been very involved in sponsoring legislation and pushing to support restaurants who have been hit so hard in all of this, and we have additional dollars there that we hope are going to be moving very, very soon. And what we call shuttered venue operator grants, or Save Our Stages was the name of the legislation that I was a sponsor of in the Senate. And we hope by the end of the week that SBA is going to actually have the grants available for live venues and theaters and cultural institutions. So that's what we're hoping is going to happen. There's also something that Gary Peters and I have worked on for a long time. Actually, Carl Levin and I originally authored something a number of years ago called the State Small Business Credit Initiative, working with MEDC to help back up and support loans being made to businesses. We have now expanded that with additional dollars that are important. And then, of course, healthcare, and that's certainly not last because it's not important. The money for vaccines and testing more people, getting PPE to people who need it. Yes, supporting our hospitals who have been the front lines and need as much robust support as we can give them. And for people individually, health insurance, extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. There's provisions here to cover people's COBRA payments, their copays if they've lost their job, to try to help folks get through the next several months and be able to keep their health care intact. And as Chris was talking about mental health and addiction, this is an area that's been a passion of mine my whole life in public service. And we know the pandemic has only made stressors worse. In January, 41% of American adults reported struggling with anxiety and depression, at 41% as opposed to 11% before the pandemic. And we know that 1 out of 4 young people now are reporting having suicidal thoughts, which is very, very concerning. And overdose deaths have surged in the pandemic. So I've been leading not only on additional resources, but a new model that's now being used, and we want to expand it in Oakland County, called Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, which basically serve the whole person, mental health, addiction services, working with health clinics for folks. And it's very much focused on having a place for someone to go instead of the jail or sitting in the ER trying to get help, but have 24-hour psychiatric emergency facilities and services for people to get them the help that they really need. And we are seeing this model, fully funded model, funding healthcare above the neck, the same as healthcare below the neck, is actually taking hold around the country right now. I'm very proud to have authored that with a Republican colleague of mine a few years ago to put quality standards in place and then begin to roll out the funding. Senator Roy Blunt and I have been working on that. So we now have 24 clinics modeled after this comprehensive care model. I've been able to bring in $112 million in the last year to support this. And 3 of those clinics are in Oakland County, Easter Seals, Michigan, the Judson Center, and CNS Healthcare. And so we're going to continue to work more.
Senator, thank you for that terrific overview of the sort of the federal programs and funding for the COVID response. How would you sort of grade the federal government's response? We've seen news of, Governor Whitmer pushing for more vaccinations and some back and forth with the Biden administration. How would you assess the federal government's response so far? And what do you see as being really key? What do you see as the next sort of key time frame? And what do you see as being key measures of improvement and getting out of this pandemic?
Sure. Well, first of all, I will not relitigate what happened at the very beginning of this over a year ago, that and lack of response and so on. But just to say, coming into the new administration, they've really hit the ground running. We have nationally, as we know, we're moving towards 600,000 deaths of Americans in our country because of this. And so, number one focus for the administration has been on getting people vaccinated and moving as quickly as possible, working with states and so on, getting the vaccines up and running. Proud of the fact that Pfizer is operating out of Kalamazoo, Portage, Michigan. I've been down there with them. And I think it's really important that and we should be proud that that work's being done in Michigan. So I believe that they are working 48 hours a day on all of this, as is the governor. And I would not want to be the governor of any state right now having to make the decisions she's had to make over the last year. I can't imagine, and weigh all the factors and people's health and lives versus economic health. It's very, very hard. But I think on balance, they are moving very quickly. I know there's a question that the governor has asked for more vaccines. I weighed in with the White House on that as well. We've freed up some. There's more that needs to happen there. But even on testing, we're seeing this week that the major chains, drugstore chains, are rolling out a home test now on COVID, working with Abbott Laboratories. And I think we're going to see more and more things happening to help you manage as an employer what's happening, as well as roll out the vaccines. So I know that for Beaumont, for our other terrific hospitals, they have been frankly slammed right now with what's happening with the new variant, with what's been happening on the ground. And I think we've got to get vaccines in people's arms. We have to have people understand this isn't over. Highly, infectious new variants, that we still have to wear those masks, no matter how frustrating they are when we're out in public. And we have to take this seriously to get through it. So we're moving much faster even than the administration thought they could. They thought they would be vaccinating 1 million people a day. The president told us in the beginning, and that now it's like 5 million people a day. So they're moving as fast as they can. And Chris, when you ask sort of next steps beyond all of this, it's really, as we've got to deal with the healthcare piece of this and people's lives and their health. But then it's all about the economy. And so the next pieces of this go to what is being called the American Jobs Plan, which is not only traditional infrastructure, which we've been talking about forever, roads, bridges, water, sewer systems, dams, all those things, but it's high-speed internet. It's also charging stations for electric vehicles. I'm very involved in the efforts as part of the next bill to deal with supply chain issues, which are critical. We should not see our auto companies being dependent on one company in Taiwan for a semiconductor chip and see layoffs as a result of that. We need to do that work here. We need to do the battery work here. We need to be using the purchasing power of the federal government to purchase from American companies. I have bipartisan legislation on that to robustly step up what we are doing, not only to purchase vehicles, but all kinds of things that we can, that frankly we make in Michigan. So the next step really is about what we do coming out of this to incentivize what I call a Make It in America agenda. And whenever we're talking about making things in America, we're talking about Michigan. So, I see this next piece as having Michigan on every page.
Right. I'm glad you talked about incentivizing and getting people back to work. One thing I know my clients have seen as being an issue, and I see a question in the chat box that goes to this, which is during the pandemic and as we come out of the pandemic, there's been a lot of I'll say entry level positions that have been very difficult to fill, right? Because in a lot of those positions, there's an incentive not to work because you can earn more, even if it's a couple $100 more, not coming back to work. What do we do to get people back to work and try to reach that, unattainable goal of full employment?
Well, this is really important. And again, it's a balancing act. Sometimes it's been the right balance. In some areas, it's not been the right balance. I will say that when all of this started, when we were talking about telling people a year ago they had to stay home, the business had to close temporarily. And you look at traditional unemployment, there's no way a family or an individual would survive on that in Michigan, $200 a month or whatever. There's just no way. And you can't tell people you can't work, but you can't pay your mortgage, you can't put food on the table and so on. So that's how the enhanced benefit started. And it really was an effort to look at what's the median income. We were told by the Labor Department that it had to be one number because they couldn't do different things in different places. The computer systems couldn't handle it and so on. It couldn't be a percentage. So they picked the original number of $600 a week. Now it's at $300 a week till September to be able to help people again kind of get through this. I would expect it will go very likely could go back to not having the enhanced benefit after that. But I know in Michigan, one of the things that's been done to help mitigate this is what we call work share. And I don't know if any of you have been involved with that, but there is a program. I've been very supportive of that and encouraging that, where if someone, if you want to bring someone back to work part-time, they can come back, receive part unemployment benefits, you pay part the salary. And so that has been something that I think originally we had 70, 80,000 businesses in Michigan this last year that were participating in. And it's a way to really kind of balance and mitigate this.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Stabenow. I had a number of clients participate in that. We want to be respectful of your time. How about one last question, which is, what do you believe is the root cause for all the political infighting that we see in Washington, D.C., and what can we do here in Michigan and amongst the business community to improve that?
Well, how many minutes do we have? Well, first of all, let me say there's always a difference of opinion and ideas. And if it's done the right way and respectful, that's what you want, right? If we don't all agree, that's fine. Over the years, and it has certainly in the US Senate become more and more of obstruction tactics, rather than how do we figure out a compromise. And frankly, this last president really lit a match on all of this, feeling that somehow if he divided people, his strength came from dividing people. I will tell you what I do, because, and I do it every day. I'm doing it today, actually, as well. I look for opportunities to work with people on something we can agree on. And I don't start from the premise we have to agree on everything, or I'd never find anybody. So I look for one thing. So I work with Senator Ward Blunt on behavioral health, and we have had some major things happen. I work with my ranking member, and I'm now chairing the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee again, Senator Bozeman from Arkansas, my ranking member. We don't agree on a lot of things, very different states, but we work together hand in glove. And my former ranking member and chairman and I wrote 2 huge farm bills that are all the food, agricultural, rural development policy for the country. And 87 votes out of 100 is what we were able to get. And so it's because we're working across the aisle. My manufacturing tax incentive expansion, 48C right now, I'm working with Steve Daines from Montana, Republican colleague from Montana. Today, I am announcing legislation that's really important to address the climate crisis from agriculture and forestry standpoint with Mike Braun, who's a Republican colleague from Indiana. We have a bill called Growing Climate Solutions, which is going to help farmers get the resources and technology and expertise they need to enter the voluntary carbon markets. And so, or whether it's Great Lakes with Rob Portman, he and I co-chair the Great Lakes Task Force. I guess my point is that even in what has been the most difficult, divisive times I have ever experienced in my life, bar none, you have to, my position is not to get sucked into that, but to look for people that I can work with. Because in the end, what all of you can do is insist that we work together and not get caught up in the divide, and also not get caught up in, all kinds of conspiracy theories and things that aren't true. Look for the facts, push us to work together, insist on results. We really do need a broadly defined infrastructure bill in this country to rebuild America. Shame on us if we don't get that done. And so we need to be held accountable for that. And we need to together look for ways that bridge the divide, not create more divides right now. Really easy to divide people and go to our own corners. Very easy thing to do. Not responsible, doesn't get anything done, but it's kind of an easy thing to do, to blame somebody else. The real question is, how are we going to figure out how to listen to each other, find some common ground, and be able to move forward? Because that's what people expect us to do. And that's how I operate every day.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. And it's always a joy to listen to you and see you again. I understand you have to go, and we're going to turn to Rep Stevens and State Rep Manoogian. Thank you very much on behalf of the Birmingham Chamber. Thank you very much for making the time. And I'm sure we all learned something.
Absolutely. Stay safe. Take
All right.
care.
Thank you, Senator
Senator.
Stabenow. All right. Well, let's keep the program going with I've been lucky to over the last few years get to know Rep Haley Stevens a little bit better. I consider her a friend, and you'll not find anyone who's more passionate or energetic about the issues that matter to Michigan and Oakland County. Congressman Haley Stevens grew up in Rochester Hills and graduated from Seaholm. She earned her master's degree in social policy and philosophy and a bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy from American University in Washington, D.C. Before being elected to Congress, Congresswoman Stevens served as chief of staff to the U.S. Auto Rescue Task Force, the federal initiative responsible for saving General Motors, Chrysler, and 200,000 Michigan jobs. She also played a key role in setting up the Office of Recovery for Automotive Communities and Workers in the White House Office of Manufacturing Policy. After serving for the Obama administration, Congresswoman Stevens worked in a manufacturing research lab focused on the future work in a digital age. Congresswoman Stevens sits on the House Committee on Education and Labor and the House Committee on Science and Space and Technology, where she also serves as chairwoman of the Research and Technology Committee. Rep. Stevens has proven to be a hard worker and is tireless in her efforts for Michigan and her constituents. I think she neglects to say in her bio that her probably biggest job is planning her upcoming wedding. And so I don't know how she finds the time for that. I also want to introduce to folks State Representative Mari Manoogian. State Rep Mari Manoogian was born and raised in Birmingham and is serving her second term representing the 40th District, which includes Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Bloomfield Township, and a portion of West Bloomfield Township. She currently serves as the Deputy Democratic Caucus Whip and as the Minority Vice Chair for the House Committee on Energy. As many of you saw, she represented our state tremendously, being a featured speaker during the Democratic National Convention, and is certainly a rising star in nationally and within the state. At 28, she is the youngest woman serving in the 101st legislature and the first Armenian American woman to serve in the Michigan House of Representatives. Rep. Manoogian is a third generation Armenian American whose grandparents came to America in the 1920s to escape Armenian genocide. She earned both her bachelor's and master's degree from the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. Perhaps Rep. Manoogian and Rep. Stevens can compare notes on their favorite bars and restaurants in DC during their college days. With that, let's dive into some questions here with Rep. Stevens and Rep. Manoogian. Let's start with you, Rep. Stevens, and welcome. And if you want to say a few opening comments, please do so. But you won your first attempt at re-election by a much thinner margin than your first election victory. Did that surprise you? What was your take going into the race?
It's great to see you all. Thank you so much. And I love hearing from Senator Stabenow, and she gave you a very comprehensive overview of the activities before the Congress, certainly getting the rescue plan done, which was signed into law just about a month ago. So and you saw it sort of came down on party lines, although I had some colleagues and friends on the other side of the aisle who said, I came really close to voting for it. And I said, well, we got a lot of Republican mayors who endorse this. And one of the things that you'll see with President Biden is that we achieve unity through delivery, and delivering for the American people and delivering for Michiganders. We certainly have. And it's great hearing Senator Stabenow talk about her manufacturing tax credit and the state small business jobs initiative, two things that I worked with her on when I was a White House appointee in the Obama administration, and were two very popular initiatives. The State Small Business Credit Initiative actually expired just a couple of years ago under the former administration. So it's a great opportunity to revive it. 48C was very popular, very overprescribed, and is something we need to bring back. And it's just been a struggle to do so. So you see a lot of the consistency around the manufacturing legislation. And as vice chair of the science committee, as well as chair of the subcommittee on research and technology, just to share with all of you what's on the docket for this quarter in this period of time is tied with the American Jobs Plan and some of the work that we need to do around setting strategies for the American Innovation Agenda, the Science Research Innovation Agenda, looking at not just how we increase funding, because I think we all know this, that funding doesn't solve all our problems, but that we might want to be pursuing new directions with our scientific research efforts. And little known fact, the state of Michigan receives hundreds of millions of dollars almost annually through our great research universities. Obviously our Big 10, but even some of our smaller universities, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars advancing our research agenda. And so I work really closely with the National Science Foundation, and I'm knee deep. I'm pursuing the Carl Levin approach to committee hearings, which is, I've been working on this for almost a year. We're finally getting the hearing. We're going to have a series of hearings around how we're going to be investing in the National Science Foundation and what that means for a regional economy such as ours in Michigan, with electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, quantum computing, and all the small businesses that supply into everything. And certainly, my very first bill of this new Congress, as Senator Stabenow was talking about, was on supply chain recovery. Interesting question, Chris. I'll answer it. It didn't surprise me at all. I think that you failed to mention that I received the most votes of anyone ever in the history of Michigan's 11th district, like by tens of thousands more than my predecessor, who would win by 13 percentage points, right? So what Chris was talking about is in 2018, I won by about 6.5 points with about 180,000 votes. In 2020, and this is, you got to love your members of Congress and your state house reps who have to run every other year, right? But in 2020, I won by about 2.5 points, and with 226,000 votes, and I won by 11,000 votes. So it's a tight margin, right? Sorry, my iPad's telling me it's running low on juice, even though it's plugged in. And so I honored to have over almost a quarter million people cast their vote for me, again, more than any in the history of the seat, but recognizing a lot of people came out to vote, right? We had just record turnout. We've got Novi in our district, for instance, and there was almost a 90% turnout. Mari knows very well the Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills turnout as well. But I think part of the reality for my seat is a lot of people looked at it and just wanted to say, oh, you're safe. We're not worried about you. You've got Oakland County and Wayne County. And I thought, well, remember what that FOIA showed. This was a district kind of drawn a long time ago. And I think they were just dubbing it a safe Republican seat. And I'm a Democrat. I'm the only Democrat in the state who was endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Joe, for being part of that ceremony that recognized, obviously we had several who were endorsed by the Detroit Chamber of Commerce, but getting that U.S. Chamber of Commerce endorsement was really a huge honor and really exciting to receive that. And it's partly because I've got my finger on the pulse of what drives our regional economy. But I think the other thing that played in my race, Chris, and then I'll stop talking, is I was the only House Democrat incumbent out of all 7 of us in the state of Michigan. We got 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans. It's a really nice mix because it's split. We do work together, on a variety of issues, as Senator Stabenow was talking about, particularly the stewardship of our Great Lakes. But I was the only Democratic incumbent attacked by the super PACs. And so I had, a multi-million-dollar smear campaign running on me, and newsflash, that worked. So I do think that's what tightened my race.
All right, thank you. Before we dive into some more Q&A from the members, let's turn to Rep. Manoogian and maybe say a few opening comments and touch on, as being in Lansing pre-COVID and now during COVID, comment on whether or not you've seen any change in terms of the political climate in Lansing. Has it gotten more polarized, less polarized, more cooperation, less cooperation? What do you see?
So to sort of echo, well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Great to be here with everyone. We're 40 minutes into this, so I felt like the good morning comments were kind of already done, but I wanted to make sure I said hello. But, Senator Stabenow really hit the nail on the head in terms of where you can find bipartisanship. That's where we need to be, and we need to be doing the work that our constituents sent us to our respective jobs to do. I will say that, there is without question that, things here, the climate in Lansing is very different. I talk often about how it's even different from last term, even though we experienced COVID last term and this term. I was in the chamber on April 30th, the day that armed militiamen and women stormed our Michigan State Capitol. And that was an experience that I talk about frequently. I am part of a couple cohorts on national security, because that's the work that I did prior to getting to the legislature. And that's one of the formative experiences I've had as a representative, and really considering how important our democracy is, and how important it is to secure it, and making sure that citizens have the right to express themselves and reach out to their elected officials, but doing it in a way that is safe for everyone involved. That said, I think that the work that we're doing in Lansing to address the coronavirus, and then of course, jumpstarting our economy, has really brought folks together across the aisle. We have seen, particularly, I want to highlight two of my colleagues, Majority Floor Leader Ben Frederick and Democratic Caucus Chair Sarah Anthony have partnered together on things such as Futures for Frontliners and the Michigan Reconnect program, which are essentially two versions of making sure that we can pay the cost of tuition for folks who are achieving associate's degrees or skills certificates in their in-district community colleges. So making sure that, we're retraining folks. So when they enter the workforce post-COVID, we have a 21st century workforce here in the state of Michigan. That's something that, was proposed by Governor Whitmer and then saw broad bipartisan support. So yes, there is without question, we've seen comments made by legislative leaders that frankly are unbecoming and not befitting of the offices they hold. In particular, comments made about the governor's appearance and wanting to fist fight her on the Capitol lawn, things like that are just not befitting of anyone holding public office, regardless of their political party. But the reality here is that, when I'm sent to work every day, I'm in my office in Lansing because I have committee in about 15 minutes actually. But, what I'm sent here to do is to reach across the aisle, and that's something I'm committed to doing. I've been working on distracted driving legislation, where it's a 3-bill package, and I partnered with 2 Republicans, and it's broadly supported by the business community, including Consumers Energy, Ford, GM, AAA, et cetera. Folks who wouldn't necessarily have a say or want to have a say in distracted driving legislation know that this is a really important effort that we're making to not just, create a good solid law that keeps folks safe, but is something we're doing to reach across the aisle to, create a climate where we're actually able to get things done for people of our state.
Thank you, Rep. Manoogian. And I just remind all the members, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And Rep. Manoogian, I know that you have to leave at 8:55. So I'm going to toss this question to you first, but certainly Rep. Stevens, weigh in if you think this, what could be done at the federal level. But we got a question that is addressing, and I know it from talking to friends and clients, the housing market is tight. It's certainly a seller's market. It's very difficult to buy a house. You have to come right away. What can be done to encourage more homes to enter the marketplace, to encourage more turnover in the housing market and do that? Is it somebody suggesting a moratorium on capping taxable value assessment, things like that? What can be done at the state level? And then same question to you, Rep. Stevens, is there anything we can do at the federal level to encourage more home sales and home ownership?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about legislation that I've introduced. I don't know that it directly addresses the question, but it's something that's actually coming up potentially this week. So I want to make sure I talk about it real quick, and then I'll throw it to Representative Stevens. But we've introduced, and we've seen it pass through the Tax Policy Committee, a first-time homebuyer savings account bill package. I partnered with a Republican from Harbor Springs on this legislation. Essentially, starting to create a culture around saving for purchasing your first home, in particular in the state of Michigan. Now, this might create more of the problem that we're looking at here because we're talking about making sure there is more inventory. I actually just saw that article, I think that Don is referencing, that was put out about how there's more real estate agents than there are homes on the market at this point. Almost like a 2-to-1 ratio was something insane that I saw a couple days ago or yesterday. And so, I think that in terms of the legislation we're working on, it hasn't passed yet. I think there's things that we can talk about to, encourage more homes to enter the marketplace. Obviously, at this point, I think there's a couple of things happening here. One, with COVID, people are, if they can avoid moving, they're going to avoid moving. During this current crisis that we're in, I don't know that this is necessarily something that is a long-term situation with regard to the housing market, but if folks can avoid having to move during coronavirus, especially if we haven't achieved that threshold of vaccinations yet, I think we might see some shifting here. So we can potentially consider doing something legislatively, but I would also say let's take a look and see what those health trends look like, because I think you might see a bit of a change in the housing market once it becomes safer to move.
Thanks, Rep. Manoogian. Rep. Stevens?
Yeah, I think in the US Congress, one of the things that we recognize as it pertains to this question is that we have just an overall lack of affordable housing in this country, and we're not building fast enough. And I don't think you need to get into any more of these incentives or moratoriums. I mean, you can pursue that. The first-time home buyer tax credit initiatives are phenomenal. This is hard lessons learned coming out of the last recession. The prices being through the roof. I'm just going to tell you all, as someone who was in the Treasury Department and picking up the pieces from when the recession officially hit at the end of 2008 and moved into the Treasury at the beginning of 2009. The two biggest purchases you make are a home and a car. And I'm paying really close attention to our local housing market. I'm talking with our realtors, and they're having great years, and there's a supply and demand problem, and it's a total seller's market. But when you look at the efforts to go into building a home, you've got materials that are, a plywood that used to cost $2 a ply, it's now $7. Glass is delayed. And part of this, and we didn't get so deep on this, but just with the monitoring of our supply chain and seeing how it's askew, I'm going to just be honest with you guys. These supply chain problems, whether we're in a pandemic, a weather event, or just in general being overly reliant on foreign entities for critical goods, critical commodities, is dangerous. These are things, that have motivated my career, and that were a part of the policy discussion over a decade ago. There's a national security issue here when it comes to the securitization of our supply chain and making sure that we have access to the goods. And now it's a cost issue. So I had the article dog-eared last night. I'm doing the dangerous thing of reading right before bed, reading my phone. And somehow, the article slips from you, but the headline was, that are we repeating what occurred in 2008 with the housing market, and are we in dangerous waters? And I think we have, we're going to do an infrastructure bill. We have got to look, as part of the infrastructure bill, home building and affordable home building, right? That is accessible to people, affordable housing across the board. I know that this is a conversation that comes up time and time again in the Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills area, certainly from the families who live there and, want to send their kids to the great schools and access all the great businesses that we have. But you shouldn't have to be a multimillionaire to live in Birmingham. And of course, we have land constraints as well. You know, we got your 6,000 square foot plot versus what you got in Bloomfield Hills, sometimes up to an acre or two. So this, to me, Chris, is a building issue. It is just, you know, the home builders, and they'll tell you, I mean, people say, since the recession, we were low on building. And now you really do have this spike. I think Manoogian's right. You know, people don't want to be moving all around in this pandemic, so they are holding on to their homes. But there are still, you know, millennials who are now finally, they're all hitting 40 and want to start buying a home. so to be continued, but major topic and something, you know, from our treasury to the halls of Congress, we're monitoring very closely.
Thank you. I think those are great points. I'll ask a question, and I'll frame it this way, which is we've seen an effort across the country to introduce these bills, changing the rules for election and trying to curtail mail-in voting. And we saw what happened in Georgia. And there's a package of bills in the Michigan legislature circulating now. I'll frame it this way, which is, why, as a business community, we saw Mary Barra come out and speak out against these types of efforts. We saw the Detroit Regional Chamber come out and speak against these efforts. Why should the business community care about these packages that are being introduced in these efforts? And I'll start with you, Representative Manoogian.
All right, I'll keep this quick because I've got 3 minutes to get down to committee. So you're right. I mean, we saw General Motors, Ford, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Quicken, many other some of our largest employers in the state of Michigan come out strongly against this legislation. I think the first op-ed I saw against the legislation actually came from Arn Tellem, who owns the Pistons, right? So I think that, you know, fundamentally, this is a democracy issue. This is not a Dems and Republicans issue. This kind of legislation has actually been introduced in states across our country, not just in Michigan. So for example, in West Virginia, where there is a pretty homogenous voting population. So they, of course, Senator Joe Manchin is a Democrat, but most other statewide elected officials in the state of West Virginia, for example, are Republicans. And yet we saw this legislation introduced there as well. This is model legislation that's being introduced in states across the country to make it more difficult for everyone to vote, regardless of your political affiliation. And the business community doesn't feel that this is representative of our American values and of democracy. That's clearly what these folks have said in their letters, in their op-eds. It's something that, you know, really gets to the heart of what it is to be an American, having the fundamental right to vote and the right to self-determined government. Frankly, it's, you know, why my family, when we escaped genocide, chose to come to the United States of America and didn't come to another country, because we felt that, you know, our government was oppressive in our, you know, in the country that we were previously living in, and we wanted to have representative government. And that includes, you know, the freedom to be an entrepreneur. That includes the freedom to petition your government and lobby your government for good legislation that helps your business or helps your family. And so that's why I believe that these companies are, you know, really coming out strongly against this legislation. And frankly, their workforce feels that these bills are untenable for them. When you look at the way that these, for example, Proposal 3, which was passed in 2018, that we had on our ballot here in Michigan that expanded voting rights, all of these things are really good, especially because when you have folks who are working, let's say, for example, as an Amazon delivery person, they're working at kind of crazy hours. They may not be able to make it to their polling location, but they have the ability to cast an absentee ballot, or they have the ability to vote by mail. Any sort of flexibility that we can offer to the American people to ensure they're able to cast their ballot in a way that is safe and secure, which our election was in 2020, I think is really good for business and really good for our country. And that's why you're seeing the business community come out against these bills.
Rep. Stevens, if I can just say a quick thank you on behalf of the chamber. I know you have to get to committee. Rep. Manoogian, thank you so much for making the time. I'm sure, like myself and our the members, would love to have more time, and certainly they welcome you back anytime to talk to the membership. And so,
more than happy to do it. Take care, everyone. Have a good morning.
Thank you.
Mari.
Thank you. All right, Congresswoman Stevens, I guess, perseverance pays. You've got the floor. It's your question to respond to.
And what question was that, Chris? Are we still talking about the voting?
Yeah,
I
we're still
think Mari
talking about
covered it.
why does it matter to the business community? Why should they weigh in? Why should they care?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to tell the business community what to do. I think that they're making the decisions. I think it's pretty evident why they'd be weighing in on voting rights and voting accessibility, and it's because it's their workers. But I personally don't lobby the business community to take their positions. I'm paying attention to it and tracking it as all of you are doing. But I'm going to watch my words here, because I personally don't look to look like I'm trying, because it's not legislation. Well, let's be clear. There's HR 1 and the Voting Rights Act, which is in the House. And then there's, this stuff going through the Michigan State House. I think what you want to pay more attention to, because I hear this a lot back home, and I assume all of you who are on this Zoom are, part of the, plugged in coalition of the willing, really trying to be informed, and maybe even geeks for politics. But I'll just say, a lot of times when I'm out and about at home, if it's, just stopping in a local enterprise or talking to people who just are working every day, incredible jobs, time and time again, they'll just say to me, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to believe. It's hard to tell what's true. And it's the news obviously feels like it sensationalizes everything. You have elected officials saying one thing, news reports saying another. And I think on this topic, with the voting legislation that's coming through the state of Michigan, the entity that is, I think, above all, most critical to listen to are Republican and Democratic clerks, who are all saying the same thing. And this has been captured in reports in the free press and the news and on, which is, this will make it harder for people to vote. And this appears to be a power grab. And it has been very eye-popping to see Republican clerks across the state. I mean, not just the ones cloistered in southeastern Michigan, but even, in the middle of the state and up north say that. And some of this infighting of removing folks from the state board of canvassers and this and that. Now, we know that we are at a really low level of trust. And, I lived through the big national event, which was, thousands of people gathered at our White House for a rally that turned into a march down the mall that turned into this violent insurrection. And it wasn't everyone who was there, but it was, you saw the pictures, right? The whole back of the Capitol was swarming with people. I didn't, when I was in here, I was right here where I'm talking to all of you in my office. I can see out of my window, right, the Capitol. And I thought, what is going on? Are they, letting them in? It's like, oh no, they're breaking windows and desecrating one of the most sacred spaces in our democracy. And then I came home and was with some local leaders, and someone who's not in the district said to me, they go, well, there wouldn't be that many people marching if there wasn't some modicum of truth. And we don't want to see more violence, but there could be more violence, if you guys in Congress don't address this. And then one of my local leaders steps up, the other local leader steps up and goes, whoa, do you really want the federal government in the hair of your, local election in your township of, 15,000 people? Now, we passed the laws, and that's what I was trying to tell them. I mean, we tried to pass these laws that would award monies to state and municipal actors for the safety and security of their election, grant dollars that they could have pursued, working on the security of our election. But it's a big fight right now in the United States. And, I think that rehabbing all of our elections and requiring people to turn in their absentee ballots the day before the election, it just gets confusing. And I'll just conclude with this. I used to be a Birmingham voter, and this is so bad, but I was, doing some spring cleaning, and I think, I had some old boxes I just hadn't looked through, and it was a box from my first campaign, and I came across this folio, and in that folio was a note from the Birmingham clerk saying, hey, you tried to submit an absentee ballot, but we couldn't read your signature, and so we're going to need you to reapply. And I don't think at the time I felt disenfranchised or anything like that. I still figured it out, right? I was working on the midterm elections on the western side of the state, which is why I had to vote absentee in Birmingham. But I just thought, gosh, this is so interesting that I still have this. And, we're kind of still having these conversations, because we can't just have, somebody, voting the wrong way or voting multiple times. Obviously, that's totally wrong. And it is a really serious thing. And, if you do break the law, it is a federal crime. It's a federal charge, but it's also, for the elderly or the young professionals or the people who work all day on the line, we need to make sure that their votes are cast in the most democratic way possible. And then I guess just last on that front, I lost Birmingham Seaholm prom queen by a vote. And there was, and not that was my cause du jour to be prom queen, but there was a whole table who had voted and no one had picked up their votes. So, there's a bunch of ways you can all look at these things, but it's certainly no laughing matter. And I think it's very eye-popping when you see the business community stepping up in the way that they have, Chris.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Stevens. We really appreciate your insights. I believe you probably have to go. Joe,
yeah, I do have a 9, but I wanted to say one last thing, if you don't
go
mind,
right
that
ahead.
didn't come up. Just because my biggest takeaway from having recently been home, I've been in DC for all last week and this week, but I was home for several weeks prior. And my big takeaway from being home, obviously schools is on everyone's mind and the vaccinations, but every time I sat down with a group, whether, I'm talking to all of you, your chamber, but, Kiwanis Club, Rotaries, different, all my connections with the mayors and township supervisors, and the big thing, and we see this everywhere we go, which is help wanted. And the fact that we just can't get the workers back to work for a variety of reasons. And, a lot of people are frustrated because, they can't match maybe what the federal benefits are giving, the stimulus checks, have sort of, obviously helped a lot of people, but there seems to be some resistance to returning to work. And I was recently up at a farmer's market. Actually, it was a food bank in Milford at Milford High School. And, on my way up, I saw, Milford schools are hiring, we need everything. We need school bus drivers, food service, custodial. And so I was out there, I was helping to pass out the food, and I was talking to the, by the way, hidden heroes of our communities, the food service workers who prepare literally all the meals. And it's a really great thing. I encourage every family to pursue these prepared meal pickups that are still going on in a lot of our school districts, because it's one less thing you have to do, right? When you're watching the kids or, juggling if you have to go to at home learning. But one of the women who was there, she was picking up her Gleaner's food box, and we were talking, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy. She has 3 kids. She's like, I just can't wait to get back to work. She goes, I'm at 15 an hour and no one will watch my 3 kids up here for under 16 an hour. And, if you go to some of the salons, they've lost some of their workers because people, it's a very in your face job, and, waiting for the vaccine, waiting for that safety and securitization. But I just want to let you all know, one, I hear that concern and I'm not naive to it. I'm not looking to make excuses to it. As an elected official, I want to say, hey, let's get back to work. It's safe. We're ready to get back to work. We need you to get back to work. I'm encouraging students who are applying for internships in my office, because I can only take a very few. I'm trying to say, hey, go get a job at a local enterprise and then get back to me. And, maybe I can work with you on some sort of fellowship or something along those lines, but that we really, and look, this comes from the fact that my parents are small business owners. My dad is trying to hire right now. I've seen this very up close for a long time, and I know how exacerbated it is. But when we talk about supply chain securitization being a national crisis, workforce is also a national security crisis, and that we need people, to be going into our establishments, and they need to be running. You got the restaurants that are way overtaxed. God forbid you lose your chef. It sends the whole restaurant into a tailspin. You got some who are working 12-hour shifts as waiters or waitresses because they just don't have the people. Some of the fast food is closing down midday because they don't have the people and on. So I'm in the trenches with you guys on that. And it's a big, big thing I want to continue to work on. So just while I had your time, Joe, and apologies for going over, I did just want to make a few mentions of that because I know that's impacting all of you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Stevens. We really appreciate your time and your insights. Joe, closing thoughts.
Thank you, Chris. Did a great job. Really appreciate it. Congresswoman Stevens, thank you so much for taking time this morning to talk with our members. You are right. Your last comment is probably the one thing we're hearing most frequently from our members is workforce and workforce development issues. So I'm glad that you are focused on that. Clearly, it's not an easy solution, but there needs to be a solution to return to true normalcy. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating this morning. I want to thank our speakers and our sponsors. I'll tell you firsthand that all three of our speakers this morning are very engaged in their areas that they're representing. They've got great support staff. They're very responsive. And so if you ever have a question or an issue or a need from either Congresswoman Stevens or Senator Stabenow, Representative Manoogian, their district offices will help you. Haley, you know that we've been in regular communication in the last 14 months about the PPP program and how to get nonprofits included in that. And so we're very grateful for the work that your office did in opening that up to 501c6 organizations. So
that was the thing of beauty, Joe, and I was honored to work with you on that. Honestly, you guys, this is such a great chamber. You guys really know how to do it. Look at how you spent this morning. You had a U.S. Senator, a Congresswoman, and a state rep on. It's just, you guys know exactly what you're doing, and it's just a real treat to be able to work with you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do want to mention before we go that if you're looking for an opportunity to actually see one another, not in a 2x2 box, but actually live and in person, we are over the moon thrilled that we're going to have a live in-person member coffee on the 29th of April at the Village Club. It's going to be outdoors, socially distanced. We're going to follow all the rules. There will be mask mandates. But if you want to have an opportunity to actually say hello to one another in person, please join us on April 29th. And with that, we'll let you all get back to your lives. We really appreciate all of your support that you give the chamber. And again, thank you to Congresswoman Stevens and our other speakers. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Take care.